Hello and welcome to English Unlocked. I'm Natalia, and you're listening to a real-life English podcast. This episode is not about rules, not about grammar tables or difficult explanations. Today, we focus on the kind of English people actually use every day without thinking about it. Real-life English doesn't sound like a textbook. It sounds simple, sometimes unfinished, sometimes soft, sometimes repetitive. And that's exactly why many learners don't recognize it at first. You can know a lot of words. You can understand grammar, but still feel lost when someone speaks naturally. That's normal. In real conversations, people don't speak perfectly. They hesitate. They repeat themselves. They change their thoughts in the middle of a sentence. And this podcast is here to help you get used to that. You don't need to repeat after me. You don't need to memorize anything. Just listen. Imagine everyday situations. A quiet morning. A short talk at home. A simple conversation on the street. This is the English you hear when someone says, "Did you sleep well?" Not really. I woke up early. I guess I'll make some coffee. Yeah, that sounds good. Nothing special. Nothing dramatic. But this is real language. English becomes natural when your brain stops treating it as a task. When it becomes background, like music, like a familiar voice. You might notice that people often start sentences and don't finish them, or they answer with just one or two words. That makes sense. I'm not sure. Probably. Maybe later. These small responses are everywhere in daily life, and understanding them is more important than knowing long, perfect sentences. While you listen, your brain is already doing the work. It connects sounds to meaning. It learns rhythm and pace. It learns what feels normal. You don't have to push yourself. You don't have to try harder. Just let English be around you. In the next part, we'll continue with more everyday moments, the kind of English you hear at home with friends or during a calm conversation. For now, stay relaxed. You're exactly where you need to be. As you keep listening, you may start noticing something important. Real-life English is not fast because people want to be difficult. It's fast because it's familiar to them. When something is familiar, we don't stop to think. We don't choose perfect words. We don't build sentences carefully. We just speak. Think about how you talk in your own language. You don't plan every sentence in advance. You start talking, and the words come on their own. That's what we're training here, not memory, but familiarity. You might hear phrases like, "I don't know if that's a good idea." I mean, it could work. Let's see how it goes. I'll think about it. These phrases don't carry strong emotion. They don't demand attention. They simply exist in everyday speech, and that's why they're powerful. Many learners focus on dramatic sentences, big emotions, perfect pronunciation. But real English lives in the quiet moments. When someone is tired and says, "I'm just gonna stay in tonight." When someone agrees softly, "Yeah, that's fine." When someone hesitates, "Well, I'm not sure." Notice how often people soften what they say. They don't sound strict. They don't sound absolute. They use words like kind of, a bit, maybe, I guess. Probably. This makes English sound relaxed and human. And the more you hear it, the more normal it feels. You don't need to understand every single word. Your brain doesn't work that way. It catches patterns. It recognizes familiar sounds. It slowly builds confidence without pressure. That's why listening like this works, especially when you're calm, especially when you're not trying to control the process. You may be lying down, sitting quietly, doing something simple, and English is just there, not demanding anything from you, not asking for effort, just being part of the moment. In the next part, we'll move into slightly longer everyday exchanges, still simple, still real, the kind of English you hear between people who know each other well. For now, keep listening. You're doing more than you think. Now the English you're hearing begins to stretch a little. Not faster, not more difficult, just longer. Because real conversations don't stop after one sentence. People continue. They add small details. They repeat themselves in different ways. You might hear someone say, "I was thinking about it earlier today." And honestly, I don't think it really matters that much. Notice how the meaning is simple, but the structure is relaxed. There's no rush to get to the point. Or someone might say, "Yeah, I talked to her yesterday, actually. She seemed fine, a bit tired, maybe, but fine." This is very typical English. People add words like, "actually," "honestly," "to be fair." I mean, not because they are necessary, but because they give the speaker time to think. English allows pauses inside sentences. It allows hesitation. It allows space. That's important for you to hear. Many learners believe good English sounds confident and sharp, but real English often sounds soft and unfinished. Sentences trail off. Ideas change halfway through. Someone might start with, "I was going to," and then stop. And that's okay. Someone might say, "It's not that I don't want to, it's just, I don't know." This isn't bad English. This is natural English. And when you listen to it slowly and calmly, your brain starts accepting uncertainty as normal. You stop waiting for perfect grammar. You stop searching for exact translations. Instead, you recognize the feeling behind the words: agreement, hesitation, comfort, politeness. These are the things that matter in real conversations. You don't need complex vocabulary to sound natural. You need rhythm and familiarity. That's why repetition works here. Hearing similar phrases again and again in slightly different forms teaches your brain flexibility, not rules, patterns. You're not memorizing sentences. You're learning how English moves, slowly, casually, without pressure. If you feel yourself drifting a little, that's fine. You don't need full focus. This kind of listening works even in the background. Your mind keeps collecting pieces quietly, naturally. In the next section, we'll stay with everyday English, but you'll hear more connected thoughts, the kind people share when they feel comfortable talking. Just keep listening. As you keep listening, the English becomes more like a quiet stream. Nothing dramatic happens. No big lesson begins. And that's exactly the point. Because real English is not made of highlights. It's made of ordinary moments. Think about how people actually talk during the day. They don't say something important every minute. Most of the time, they speak just to stay connected. Someone might say, "I don't know. I guess it just felt like the right thing to do." Or, "It wasn't perfect, but it was okay. It worked." These sentences don't carry strong emotion. They carry acceptance. And that tone is very common in English. English often sounds neutral, balanced, not too emotional, not too cold. That's why many learners think it sounds flat. But it isn't flat, it's calm. And calm speech is easier to join. When you speak English, you don't need to impress. You don't need to sound clever. You just need to sound comfortable. That comfort comes from hearing English used without effort. Listen to how often people soften their words. They say, "kind of," "a bit," "maybe," "I think," "I guess," not because they are unsure, but because they are polite. English avoids extremes. Instead of "this is bad," someone says, "I'm not sure this really works." Instead of "I hate it," they say, "It's not really my thing." This creates space. It leaves room for the other person. And when you understand this, you stop translating directly from your own language. You stop trying to sound strong. You start sounding natural. Your ear begins to notice patterns like, "It's not that, it's just," "I wouldn't say," but "I don't mind," as long as. These are not grammar rules. They are habits. Habits you can only learn by listening. That's why this slow, continuous format matters. Your brain isn't under pressure to perform. It's allowed to observe. And observation leads to intuition. At some point, you'll feel that a sentence sounds right, even if you can't explain why. That's real progress, not speed, not accuracy, but familiarity. If you're listening while resting, that's perfect. If your thoughts wander, that's fine. English is still there, moving quietly in the background. In the next part, we'll stay with everyday speech, but you'll notice more emotions hidden inside simple words. Nothing dramatic, just human. There's something important about how English handles emotion. Very often, emotion is not spoken directly. It's implied. Instead of saying, "I'm sad," people say, "I don't know. It just feels a bit heavy today." Instead of, "I'm angry," they say, "I'm a little frustrated, to be honest." English speakers often hide strong feelings behind soft words, not because they don't feel deeply, but because the culture values control and space. You'll hear phrases like, "I'm not great, but I'll be fine. It's been a long day. I'm a bit tired, that's all." These sentences carry much more meaning than they show on the surface. When you learn English, it's important to hear what's under the words. Tone matters more than vocabulary. A simple "yeah" can mean agreement, hesitation, disappointment, acceptance, and you understand it not from the word, but from the pause, the breath, the rhythm. That's why listening like this helps. You're training your ear for nuance. For example, listen to this pattern. "I mean," followed by a pause. That pause often means, I'm choosing my words carefully, or I guess, which often means, I don't want to sound too strong. English protects the listener. It leaves room for interpretation. That's also why English conversations feel gentle, even when the topic is serious. People might say, we should probably talk about it at some point, which actually means, this matters, but I don't want to push you. As a learner, you don't need to copy everything immediately. Just let these patterns become familiar. Let your brain recognize them. When you hear, that makes sense, it doesn't always mean full agreement. Sometimes it just means, I understand your point. When you hear, fair enough, it often means, I accept it, even if I don't fully agree. These phrases are social tools. They keep conversations smooth, and smoothness is a big goal in English. Not perfection, not speed, flow. If you ever feel like English sounds indirect, that's because it is. And that indirectness is kindness. Listening to English this way, slowly, calmly, without pressure, helps you absorb that kindness. You begin to feel when to soften your words, when to pause, when silence is okay. And silence is okay in English. You don't have to fill every second. A short pause doesn't mean failure. It means thought. So if you're listening now and not repeating, that's fine. Your mind is doing quiet work. English is settling. Just stay here with the sound. One of the most comforting things about real-life English is how often people don't finish their thoughts. You'll hear sentences that trail off, like, I was thinking maybe we could just, and then nothing. And that's okay. The listener understands. English allows incompleteness. It allows space. In real conversations, people rarely speak in perfect, closed sentences. They leave doors open. For example, it's kind of one of those things, you know? This sentence doesn't explain anything clearly, but emotionally, it explains a lot. It means, this is complicated. This doesn't need words. You understand without details. And often, the other person nods because they do understand. Another common pattern is soft starting. Instead of saying, I disagree, people say, I'm not sure I see it the same way. Instead of, you're wrong, they say, I might be mistaken, but these phrases aren't about grammar. They're about safety. They make conversation feel safe. That's why learning English only from textbooks can feel strange. Textbooks teach structure. Real life teaches comfort. Comfort sounds like, take your time. No rush. It's all good. Whenever you're ready. You'll hear these phrases everywhere. They reduce pressure. And pressure is the enemy of language learning. When your body is tense, your brain closes. But when things sound gentle, your brain opens. That's why this kind of listening works. You're not trying to memorize. You're letting patterns repeat. Repetition without effort is how children learn, and adults can learn this way too. Notice how often English uses small words. Just, kind of, a bit, maybe, probably. These words soften everything. I'm tired versus I'm just a bit tired. The meaning changes. The emotional weight changes. English often chooses the softer version, not because people are weak, but because they want harmony. You don't need to analyze every phrase. Just let them pass through you. Even if you don't remember them tomorrow, they'll be there when you need them. They'll appear naturally. That's the magic of passive listening. You're not pushing English in. You're allowing it in, and it stays longer that way. So stay relaxed. There's nothing to do right now. Just listen. Just be here. Just let English sound normal. There comes a moment in slow listening when English stops being something separate from you. It becomes part of the background, like the quiet hum of a room, like the soft movement of air. You're not trying to understand anymore. You're simply allowing the sound to exist. This is where real learning begins, because language grows in silence. It grows in moments when you aren't paying attention, when you don't expect progress, when your mind is relaxed enough to let new patterns in. Think about how people speak when they're tired, or when they're sitting on a sofa after a long day. Their English becomes gentle, low, and structured. Someone might say, "I thought today would be easier, but it kind of wasn't." Or, "I don't really know what I'm doing tomorrow." Maybe nothing, maybe something small. These are not textbook sentences. They're soft, human, calm. You'll notice how often English allows uncertainty. It doesn't demand clarity. It doesn't force strong statements. Instead of deciding, people explore. They say, "I'm thinking about it. I might do that. I'm not sure yet. I guess we'll see." This comfort with uncertainty is a key element of natural English. It reflects how people truly experience life, without clear answers, without perfect plans, without always knowing the right thing to say. And that's why English feels so natural when you listen without pressure. Because real English is not about correctness. It's about presence, being present in a conversation, even if your grammar isn't perfect, even if you don't know every word, even if you pause often. Pauses are not mistakes. They're space for connection. A simple, "Let me think for a moment," shows confidence, not weakness. A soft inhale before answering shows honesty. Language is more than words. It's the shape of breath, the rhythm of silence, the gentle falling of thoughts. You're learning that now, without trying, and that's exactly how your brain wants it. The more you relax, the more English settles, like sand in water, slowly falling, quietly forming layers. You may not notice each grain, but the foundation is building. You may hear a phrase today and forget it by tomorrow, but the rhythm stays, the feeling stays, the familiarity stays. And one day, without warning, you'll speak with ease, simply because your mind has heard enough softness to mimic it. For now, you don't need effort. You just need presence. Keep breathing. Keep listening. Let the sound wrap gently around your thoughts. You are learning in the quiet, even now. As the listening continues, something subtle happens. English stops feeling like a foreign sound. It starts to feel familiar, not because you understand everything, but because your ear has heard it often enough. Familiarity does not come from effort. It comes from time. And time works quietly. You might notice that certain phrases feel softer now. They don't stand out. They don't demand attention. They simply pass. Someone says, "I don't really mind," or "It's okay, honestly." These phrases don't carry strong emotion. They carry acceptance. And acceptance is a big part of real conversations. English is full of small signals that say, "I'm open," "I'm listening," "I'm not pushing." You hear them in short responses. Yeah, right, I see. These sounds are not empty. They keep the conversation alive. You don't need full sentences to communicate. Often, just presence is enough. That's something many learners don't realize at first. You don't need to speak a lot. You don't need to explain everything. You can simply be there. English allows that. Listen to how people often respond to stories. They don't interrupt. They don't comment on every detail. They say, "That makes sense. I get that. Yeah, I know what you mean." These phrases don't add information. They add connection. Connection is more important than correctness. And connection is what this listening builds. You're learning how English feels when it's relaxed, when it's unforced. That feeling stays with you, even when words fade. You may be listening now without clearly hearing every sentence. That's fine. Your brain doesn't need clarity to learn rhythm. Rhythm is what tells you when a sentence ends, when a pause is natural, when silence is okay, and silence is okay. In English, silence often means "I'm thinking," "I'm present," "I'm listening." It doesn't mean "I don't know English." So if you ever pause while speaking, remember this moment. Remember how calm the silence feels. Language lives comfortably inside silence, and you're allowing that now. You don't need to hurry. You don't need to move forward. Just let the sound continue at its own pace. English is not going anywhere. It's staying with you, quietly, patiently. There is a point in listening when English begins to feel less like a language and more like a presence. It doesn't stand in front of you anymore. It sits beside you. You're not chasing meaning. You're sharing space with sound. This is where real comfort appears. You may notice that some phrases now feel almost obvious, even if you couldn't explain them before. Not because you studied them, but because you've heard them enough times. In a calm state, calm changes everything. When the body is relaxed, the mind stops defending itself. It doesn't ask, "Am I doing this right? Should I understand more?" It simply listens. That's why moments like these are powerful. You hear English the way it is used when nothing is at stake. When people are not performing. When they are just being. Someone might say, "I don't really feel like doing much today." Or, "I think I'll just take it easy." These sentences are simple, but they carry an entire mood. A slower pace, a softer day, less expectation. English reflects life. It reflects how people actually feel. When they're tired, when they're quiet, when they don't need to explain themselves. You're learning to recognize that tone, not intellectually, emotionally, and emotional understanding stays longer than memorized rules. You might notice that your breathing has slowed. Your thoughts have spaced out. That's a good sign. It means your nervous system feels safe, and a safe nervous system absorbs language naturally. No pressure, no resistance, just exposure. The voice continues gently, not demanding your attention. English is no longer the focus. It's the background, like a familiar radio station that doesn't distract you, but keeps you company. This is how English becomes part of your life, not something you turn on to study, but something that exists around you, something normal, something calm. If your mind drifts, that's fine. If you come back to the sound, that's fine too. There is no wrong way to be here. English doesn't judge your attention. It stays quietly, patiently, and every minute you spend like this adds another layer of familiarity. You don't need to notice it happening. It's already happening. Just keep listening. Just keep resting. The sound will stay with you. As the listening continues, English becomes quieter inside you. Not weaker, just calmer. It no longer asks to be understood. It no longer tries to stand out. It blends into your inner space. This is where learning feels almost invisible. You may notice that your thoughts don't interrupt the sound anymore. They move slowly, or they wait. English and silence begin to share the same place. That sharing is important because language doesn't need to replace silence. It needs to live next to it. In real life, conversations are full of quiet moments. People pause, they breathe, they think, and no one rushes them. Someone might say, "Yeah, I've been thinking about that." And then there's silence. That silence is not awkward. It's thoughtful. English allows that. It gives people time to exist inside their thoughts, without pressure to fill the space. Many learners are afraid of silence. They think silence means failure, but silence is part of fluency. Fluent speakers don't rush. They don't panic. They allow space. Listening like this teaches you that space is safe. You may feel that English is no longer new in this moment. It doesn't trigger alertness. It feels familiar enough to fade into the background. That's a very good sign. It means your brain has stopped treating English as a threat. It has started treating it as environment. And environments shape us quietly. You don't notice the air around you, but you breathe it all the time. You don't notice familiar sounds, but they comfort you. English can become that kind of sound. Something you don't analyze, but something that supports you. This is why long listening matters. Not 5 minutes, not quick exercises, but extended time, where the language has room to settle. You're giving English permission to exist without being judged. And in that permission, your confidence grows, not loudly, not suddenly, but steadily, like a slow shift you only notice later. One day, you'll hear a sentence and feel that it fits before you even think about it. That feeling starts here, in moments like this, when nothing is required of you. So stay where you are. Let the sound continue softly. There is no need to move forward. No need to finish anything. English is staying with you, quietly, naturally, without effort. At this point, English is no longer something external. It doesn't arrive from the outside. It feels like it's already there, not as words you actively listen to, but as a familiar sound that belongs in the space around you. This is where effort disappears completely. You're not waiting for meaning. You're not checking understanding. You're simply sharing time with the sound. That sharing is gentle. In real life, this is how people listen when they trust the other person. They don't analyze every word. They don't prepare responses. They listen with their whole body. That kind of listening is calm, and calm listening is powerful. English does not need to be loud to be absorbed. It does not need emphasis. It needs repetition in safety. You may notice that the voice feels predictable now. Not boring, predictable in a comforting way. You know it won't rush. You know it won't surprise you. That predictability allows your mind to rest deeper. When the mind rests, it stops resisting unfamiliar sounds, and unfamiliar sounds slowly become familiar. This is how accents stop feeling strange, how rhythm starts to feel natural, not through correction, through presence. You may hear phrases like, "It's okay," "It's fine," "There's time." These phrases repeat often in English, not because people lack vocabulary, but because reassurance matters. Reassurance creates connection, and connection is what language is for. You're learning that English doesn't always try to inform. Often, it tries to comfort. It keeps things moving smoothly. It keeps people at ease. You might feel now that English doesn't interrupt your thoughts anymore. It flows around them. That's a sign of familiarity. A language you're afraid of always feels sharp. A language you're comfortable with feels soft. Right now, English is soft, and softness stays. You don't need to remember this moment. You don't need to mark progress. Progress is happening quietly, without asking for recognition. Just like breathing, just like rest. Stay where you are. Let the sound remain. There is no need to reach the end yet. We can stay here longer. There is a certain depth that appears when listening lasts long enough. Not a depth of meaning, but a depth of comfort. English no longer asks to be processed. It no longer asks to be translated. It simply stays. At this stage, the sound becomes familiar. In the same way a room becomes familiar at night. You don't see every object clearly, but you know where everything is. You're not alert. You're not searching. You're just present. English can exist like that too. You may notice that your body feels settled. There is no tension in listening. The sound does not demand anything. It does not interrupt. It accompanies. This is how people listen to someone they trust. They don't wait for key points. They don't prepare answers. They allow the voice to exist without pressure. That kind of listening creates openness, and openness is where language grows best. You may hear familiar shapes of sentences now, not exact words, shapes. You recognize when a sentence is ending before it ends. You recognize when a pause is coming. That recognition is not intellectual. It's intuitive. And intuition is stronger than memory. You don't need to recall rules. When intuition guides you, this is why listening like this matters. It trains the part of your mind that knows without explaining. English becomes something you feel, rather than something you analyze. You may notice now that even silence feels comfortable. There is no need to fill it. English does not rush to fill silence either. In real conversations, silence often means trust. It means, I'm here. I don't need to prove anything. I'm not in a hurry. You are learning that too. You're learning that language does not need to perform. It needs to belong. Right now, English belongs in this space. It fits the quiet. It fits the slow rhythm of breathing. It fits the lack of urgency. You don't need to follow along. You don't need to stay aware. The sound is doing its work quietly, and that quiet work is lasting. Even if you forget everything tomorrow, this familiarity remains. It settles deeper than memory. It becomes part of how English feels to you. And how a language feels is more important than how much you know about it. So stay here. Let the sound continue. There is no need to move forward yet. English is comfortable here. There is a gentle sense of continuity now. Nothing begins. Nothing ends. English does not arrive as something new anymore. It feels like it has already been here for a while. This is the moment when listening becomes almost invisible. You may not notice the voice clearly. You may only notice the feeling it creates. That feeling is calm, steady, and changing. Language does not need attention to stay present. It can exist quietly, like a familiar sound in the background. In real life, this is how people talk late at night, when there is no schedule, no rush, no reason to impress. Someone might say, I don't know, it's just one of those nights, and nothing more needs to be said. The meaning is already shared. English often works like that. It relies on shared space, shared time, shared silence. You are learning that now, without effort. Your mind is not trying to understand every sentence. It is not trying to translate. It is simply allowing the sound to pass through. That allowance is powerful. When there is no resistance, language settles naturally. You may notice that English no longer feels separate from your own thoughts. It doesn't interrupt them. It flows alongside them. This is how fluency begins, not with speed, not with accuracy, but with ease. Ease comes from familiarity. Familiarity comes from time. And you are giving English time right now. There is no need to hurry, no need to check progress. Nothing is expected from you. The sound remains steady. The pauses remain long enough to let everything breathe. Silence is not empty here. It supports the sound, and the sound respects the silence. Your body remains at rest. Breathing continues on its own. There is nothing to fix. You are exactly where you need to be. English stays with you in this quiet way, not as a task, not as a goal, but as a presence. And presence is enough. We can stay here longer. The longer this listening continues, The more English becomes part of the atmosphere, it no longer feels like a voice speaking to you. It feels like a voice existing around you. There is no separation. You are not on one side and the language on the other. Everything shares the same space. This is how comfort forms. Comfort does not need explanation. It does not need clarity. It only needs consistency. And that consistency is here now. The sound remains even. The pace does not change. Nothing sudden happens. You may notice that you are no longer waiting for the next sentence. You are no longer anticipating anything. There is nothing to anticipate. This moment is complete as it is. English does not move the moment forward. It stays inside it. That is how people speak. When they feel safe, they don't hurry to finish. They don't rush to explain. They allow thoughts to unfold slowly. Someone might say, "I was thinking about it earlier, and I guess it's not really that important." The sentence doesn't build tension. It releases it. English often releases tension. It softens situations. It lowers intensity. That's why it can feel calming to listen to. You are absorbing that softness now, not consciously, not deliberately. It settles on its own. Your mind may feel very quiet now, or it may drift in and out. Both are natural. Listening does not stop when awareness fades. Language continues quietly, in the background. This is where deep familiarity forms, not when you are alert, but when you are relaxed enough to stop controlling the process. English is no longer something you do. It is something that happens, and it happens gently. You don't need to hold onto anything from this part. You don't need to remember any phrase. Memory is not the goal here. Feeling is. And the feeling right now is calm. That calm becomes associated with English, and that association stays. Later, when you hear English in real life, your body will remember this calm. Your breathing will stay steady. Your thoughts will stay open. That is real progress. Not louder, not faster, just easier. So stay where you are. Let the sound continue softly. There is no end yet. We can keep going. There is a softness now that doesn't change. English no longer feels like something that enters the room. It feels like something that has always been there. There is no beginning to notice, no ending to wait for. The sound exists in the same way the night exists, quietly, without explanation. You are not following sentences anymore. You are sharing space with sound. This is a very natural state. In everyday life, this is how people listen when they trust someone completely. They don't listen for information. They listen for presence. English becomes presence here. It does not try to teach. It does not try to impress. It stays simple. You may hear familiar shapes of phrases pass through, but they do not stop your rest. They don't ask to be remembered. They simply move through the quiet. Someone might say, "It's okay," or, "Yeah, that makes sense." And nothing more is needed. Meaning is already shared. This is how real conversations feel. When there is no tension, when there is no need to prove anything. English allows that kind of space, and you are learning it now, without effort, Your body remains still. Breathing continues naturally. There is no need to check if you're listening correctly. There is no correct way to listen like this. Awareness can come and go. Language stays anyway. You may notice that English no longer creates mental images. It doesn't trigger analysis. It simply exists alongside your thoughts. This is familiarity at work. Familiar things don't demand attention. They feel safe enough to fade into the background. And safety is what allows language to stay long-term. Not excitement, not pressure. Safety. You are building that now, quietly, slowly, without asking anything of yourself. There is no finish line here, no point to reach, only continuation. English remains calm. The space remains open. Nothing changes. And that's exactly how it should be. We can stay here longer. The sound continues without asking anything from you. There is no need to respond, no need to follow, no need to understand. English remains present in the same quiet way. It feels settled now, as if it has found its place. You may notice that nothing about the sound feels new anymore, and that is a good thing. Newness requires attention. Familiarity allows rest. Real-life English often sounds like this. Not exciting, not dramatic, just steady. People speak like this when they feel comfortable, when they are not performing, when they are not trying to impress. Someone might say, "I think I'll just stay in tonight," or "I don't really feel like doing much." These sentences don't carry urgency. They don't ask for reaction. They simply describe a state. English is very good at describing states, without exaggeration. That calm description is what you are hearing now. You are learning the emotional level of everyday English. Not high, not low, balanced. This balance makes conversations feel easy. It allows people to exist together without pressure. Your mind recognizes this balance, even if you are not fully aware of it. Recognition does not need attention. It needs exposure. And you are giving English long, uninterrupted exposure. That matters more than short, focused study. Because long exposure builds trust. Trust tells your brain, this sound is safe. This sound belongs. Once the brain believes that, resistance disappears. You don't tense up when you hear English. You don't prepare yourself. You just listen. And listening becomes natural. You may feel that your thoughts are slower now, or that they drift easily. That is the sign of rest. English does not disturb that rest. It moves alongside it. The pauses remain long enough to let everything breathe. Silence does not feel empty here. It feels supportive. The sound respects that silence. Nothing pushes forward. Nothing pulls back. Everything stays exactly where it is. This moment does not need improvement. It does not need change. English fits into it without effort. You can stay here as long as you like. There is no need to prepare for an ending yet. We can continue. At this point, English feels almost weightless. It doesn't sit heavily in your mind. It doesn't demand space. It simply floats gently in the background. This is how familiar sounds behave. They don't compete for attention. They don't interrupt thought. They coexist. You may notice now that English doesn't trigger effort anymore. There is no inner reaction like, I need to understand this. That reaction has softened, and that softness is important because language settles best when there is no internal resistance. You are not holding English at a distance. You are letting it stay close, without expectation. That closeness builds comfort. In real life, people often speak without trying to be interesting. They speak to stay connected. Someone might say, "It's been kind of a quiet day," or "Nothing much happened, really." These sentences don't carry information. They carry presence. They say, "I'm here. I'm sharing this moment." English is very good at that. And listening like this teaches you how present sounds in English. It sounds unhurried. It sounds open. There is room between words. There is room between thoughts. That room allows meaning to breathe. You may notice that silence now feels natural, not something to fill. That's an important shift, because when silence feels natural, language feels less stressful. You don't feel rushed to speak. You don't feel pressure to respond quickly. You allow yourself time, and English allows that too. This is how confidence grows, not through speed, but through ease. Ease comes from repetition in safety. You are experiencing that now. The sound remains calm. The pace remains steady. Nothing changes suddenly. Your body continues resting. Breathing remains slow and automatic. There is nothing you need to adjust. English stays quietly present, supporting rest rather than interrupting it. You don't need to remember any of this later. Memory is not the goal. The feeling is, and the feeling now is steady, soft, familiar. That familiarity stays, even when the sound fades later. The calm association remains, and that is what matters. So stay where you are. Let the sound continue gently. There is no ending yet. We can continue as long as you want. The longer this continues, the less English feels like something you are listening to. It feels more like something that surrounds you, like a quiet presence in the room, like a familiar sound that belongs there. There is no need to locate it, no need to focus on it. It simply exists. This is how people listen when they are completely at ease. They are not waiting for information. They are not preparing a response. They're just sharing time. English can do that too. It can share time with you without asking anything in return. You may notice now that even the idea of learning feels distant. There is no effort to improve, no attempt to control the experience, and that distance is healthy because language does not grow under pressure. It grows when it is allowed to stay. You are giving English that permission now. It stays quietly. It doesn't demand clarity. It doesn't demand memory. It simply repeats its presence. And repetition without effort creates familiarity. Familiarity creates confidence. Confidence does not announce itself. It settles slowly. You may hear familiar tones pass through the sound, not specific sentences. Tones, a calm tone, a neutral tone, a reassuring tone. English uses these tones often in everyday life, not to persuade, not to explain, just to exist together. You are learning to feel those tones. You are learning when English is relaxed, when it is neutral, when it is gentle. This knowledge does not come from words. It comes from time. Time spent listening without judgment. Your body remains at rest. Your breathing continues naturally. There is no need to change position. No need to move forward. Everything is fine as it is. English fits into this moment without disturbing it. That is an important experience because when English feels like it doesn't disturb your peace, you stop resisting it. You stop tensing up, and that is when it becomes part of you. Not something you use, but something you live with. This is how English becomes normal. Not special, not difficult, just there. Stay with this feeling. There is no rush. We are not close to an ending yet. We can continue quietly. You don't need to do anything now. There is nothing to remember, nothing to repeat, nothing to check. English has already done its work. It stayed with you quietly, without pressure, without effort. This is how language becomes familiar, not through force, but through presence. You listen the way people listen in real life, calmly, without trying to control every word. That's why this matters. English doesn't need to be loud to stay. It doesn't need attention to settle. It stays when it feels safe. You heard real-life English. The kind people use every day. The kind that flows naturally, with pauses, with softness, with space. You can come back to this kind of listening anytime. When you want calm, when you want company, when you want English to feel normal again. This is English Unlocked. Real-life English, spoken slowly and clearly. I'm Natalia. Thank you for listening.